The universe had a peculiar way of organizing itself. Like some cosmic high school cafeteria, species across the Milky Way had arranged themselves into a neat little hierarchy based on who could bench press the most moons or survive the most apocalypses. And humans? Another training exercise failed. How predictable. Commander Vexthorian's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as a dismissive scoff, though it sounded more like someone trying to unclog a garbage disposal filled with cutlery. The Unified Galactic Defense Force training facility on Proxima Centauri's second moon wasn't known for its hospitality, but the cold metal benches in the debriefing room seemed particularly unforgiving today. Specialist Tomas Reyes, all 5 feet and 140 pounds of him, shifted uncomfortably as the commander's compound eyes fixed on him. And once again, the human element proves to be the weak link. The commander's exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lighting as he gestured toward Tomas with one of his 4 arms. Perhaps your species should stick to what they're good at, whatever that might be. A ripple of what passed for laughter moved through the assembled soldiers. The Draconians rumbled deep in their armored chests. The Zentauri's translucent skin pulsed with amused bioluminescence. Even the usually stoic Maverians whistled through their gill slits. "His all due respect, Commander," Tomas began, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "The exercise parameters weren't optimized for human physiology." "The universe doesn't optimize for humans, Specialist Reyes." Commander Vexthorian's voice dripped with condescension thicker than Jovian crude oil. "The universe optimizes for survival, and your kind—" He paused, mandibles twitching in what Tomas had learned was their equivalent of a smirk. "Your kind is soft, fragile, slow, no natural armor, no enhanced senses, no significant muscle density." "Yet here we are," Tomas replied, earning a few surprised glances. "Fighting alongside the best." "Alongside? No. Behind. Always behind." The commander turned away, clearly considering the conversation beneath his attention. "Dismissed. Tomorrow's exercise begins at 500 hours. Try not to die, hypothetically speaking." As the unit filed out, the various species naturally clustered together. The Draconians, towering nearly 9 feet tall with their reinforced bone structure and scaled hides that could deflect small arms fire. The Centauri, whose neural networks operated at triple human speed, allowing them to process battlefield information faster than any computer. The Maverians, whose adaptive metabolism let them function in environments from sub-zero to volcanic. And then there was Tomas, the only human in the unit. The only human on this moon, actually. Earth had been granted exactly 17 slots in the UGDF's elite training program, and Tomas sometimes wondered if his selection had been some kind of cosmic practical joke. "Don't let him get to you," said Lieutenant Kiranath, a Centauri whose skin currently pulsed a sympathetic blue. She was the closest thing Tomas had to a friend here. "Vexthorian comes from a warrior brood. His egg clutch fought each other before they even hatched." "I'm fine," Tomas assured her, though they both knew it was a lie. "Just tired." As they walked toward the barracks, something moved at Tomas's feet, a shadow that seemed to flow rather than step. About the size of a medium Earth dog but with a sleeker profile, the creature matched Tomas's pace perfectly. "I still don't understand why they let you keep that thing," Kernaz said, her skin rippling with patterns that indicated curiosity mixed with unease. "No other species is allowed to bring planetary companions." "Special dispensation," Tomas replied with a shrug. Earth's integration treaty included provisions for service animals. The creature, a domestic house cat with jet black fur and amber eyes, looked up at the Centauri with what could only be described as magnificent indifference. "Does it actually provide any service?" Kiernos asked, keeping a respectful distance. Artemis keeps me sane. Tomas smiled down at the cat, who chose that moment to yawn, displaying a impressive set of teeth. That's service enough. Kiernos' skin flickered in the patterns of skepticism. The commander thinks it's a sign of weakness, that humans need emotional support from lesser creatures. The commander, Tomas said carefully, doesn't understand Earth or its life forms very well. As they reached the barracks, they passed a group of draconian soldiers engaged in their daily ritual combat exercises. Each one could have torn Tomas in half without breaking a sweat, or whatever their species did instead of sweating. Probably something efficient and tactically advantageous. Look, growled one of them, Sergeant Drax, the unofficial leader of what Tomas privately called the Bully Brigade. The soft one returns with his even softer pet. Careful, another draconian rumbled, mock fear in his gravelly voice. That tiny ball of fur might shed on your combat armor. Artemis, for her part, sat down and began methodically cleaning her paw, as if the massive reptilian soldiers weren't even worthy of acknowledgement. You know, Tomas said, unable to help himself, on Earth we have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight. You brought the wrong animal then, Drax interrupted with a barking laugh. Even your metaphors are weak. Tomas continued toward his quarters. A cramped space, but at least one where he didn't have to constantly prove himself worthy of oxygen. Artemis followed, her movements silent and graceful in a way that even the most accomplished Zentari would envy. Once inside, Tomas collapsed onto his bunk, the day's failures weighing on him. The UGDF had been humanity's ticket to the galactic stage, a chance to prove they belonged among the stars. But 3 months into training, and Tomas was beginning to wonder if the skeptics back home had been right. Maybe humans weren't cut out for this. Artemis jumped onto the bed with practiced ease and curled up against Tomas's side, her purr a soothing vibration against his ribs. At least you don't think I'm a disappointment, he murmured, scratching behind her ears. The cat blinked slowly in response, a gesture that always seemed oddly profound coming from her. Then she settled her head on her paws and closed her eyes, the picture of contentment. The irony wasn't lost on Tomas. Here he was, supposedly representing the best humanity had to offer, and he couldn't complete a basic training exercise that the Draconians considered a warm-up. Yet this cat, this ordinary Earth cat, navigated alien environments with perfect composure, unbothered by different gravity, strange smells, or hostile glares. His personal tablet chimed with an incoming message, probably the detailed breakdown of today's failure, annotated with the commander's special brand of encouragement, like human reflexes inadequate, or cardiovascular system embarrassingly inefficient. Instead, it was a mission brief. The unit was being deployed. Not a drill, not an exercise, an actual field operation on Proxima B. The indigenous species had discovered their observation post and were becoming problematic. The unit would drop in, secure the facility, extract the science team, and leave before the locals organized a proper response. Combat drop in 12 hours. Well, Tomas said to Artemis, who opened one eye lazily, looks like we'll get to disappoint the commander in a real-world scenario now. The cat yawned again and stretched, extending her claws momentarily before retracting them. Easy for you to say, Tomas muttered. You just have to look cute and sleep. I have to somehow not get killed by angry aliens while other, slightly less angry aliens watch me fail. Artemis rolled onto her back, exposing her belly in what seemed like an invitation for pets, but was, as any cat owner knew, potentially a trap. As Tomas cautiously rubbed the soft fur, he couldn't help but smile. Everyone in this unit had evolved on different worlds under different suns, developed different strengths and adaptations to survive in their native environments. Yet somehow, they all shared one trait: absolute confidence in their own superiority. Everyone except him, and maybe that was his real problem. The deployment alert sounded through the barracks, a final reminder to prepare. Tomorrow, they'd drop into unknown territory, face unknown dangers. What do you think, Artemis? Ready to show them what Earth creatures can do? The cat closed her eyes again and resumed purring, the very picture of unconcern. The absurdity of it all suddenly struck Tomas. Here he was, galaxies from home, part of humanity's first real venture into the cosmic community, surrounded by beings who could tear him apart or outthink him without breaking a sweat. And his greatest comfort came from an animal whose ancestors had decided humans were acceptable roommates primarily because they could operate can openers. Yet somehow, as he lay there with the small predator curled against him, Tomas felt a strange confidence beginning to build. Tomorrow would be different. It had to be. After all, if a house cat could adapt to life among the stars with such easy grace, maybe there was hope for him yet. The dropship shuddered as it entered Proxima B's atmosphere, metal groaning like it was having second thoughts about this whole flying concept. Tomas checked his armor seals for the 7th time, painfully aware that while the others wore their combat suits like second skins, his looked more like he'd borrowed it from a much more impressive cousin. "Nervous, soft one?" Drax rumbled from across the bay, his massive frame barely contained by the reinforced jump seat. "First real mission can be revealing." "I'm good," Tomas replied, focusing on his equipment check. Drax laughed, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside. "He says he's good. Tell me, tiny human, where is your emotional support creature now?" Artemis was in fact secured in a specialized carrier attached to Tomas's back. The integration treaty had been very specific. Service animals could not be separated from their handlers, even during combat operations. The UGDF brass had protested, but Earth's diplomats had somehow made it stick. "Standard procedure for non-combatant support units," Tomas said, the practiced line rolling off his tongue. The truth was more complicated. No one had expected a human to qualify for the elite units with a cat in tow, so no one had bothered to create regulations against it. By the time they realized their oversight, the paperwork was done, and bureaucracy was the one true universal constant. Commander Vexthor's voice cut through the bay. "Final approach. Objective: secure the research outpost. Extract the science team. Neutralize any immediate threats. The locals have primitive projectile weapons and rudimentary energy tools. Should be beneath your capabilities." The dropship lurched as something impacted its hull. "Correction," the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "The locals have anti-aircraft capabilities. Evasive maneuvers initiated." The ship banked hard, throwing the soldiers against their restraints. A second impact hit with more force, and warning lights flashed across the bay. "Hull breach in engine section," the pilot reported, their voice unnaturally calm. "Controls compromised. Preparing for emergency deployment." The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Mivarian equivalent of swearing. "Prep for hot drop. Insertion point compromised. We scatter, regroup at the research facility. Standard communication protocols." Hot drop was military speak for "we're about to leap out of a failing spacecraft into an unknown combat zone with minimal intelligence." Tomas had trained for this, but training always assumed functional equipment and some semblance of a plan. The bay doors opened with a hydraulic scream, revealing a chaotic landscape below. The research facility was visible in the distance, a gleaming metal structure nestled between purple-hued rock formations. Between the dropship and the objective lay what looked like a small city constructed of some crystalline material that caught and fractured the light of Proxima Centauri. "Go! Go! Go!" The commander's voice cut through the howling wind. One by one, the soldiers activated their jump packs and launched themselves into the alien sky. Tomas was last. As protocol dictated, weakest members dropped last to avoid becoming obstacles. He checked Artemis's carrier one final time. The cat looked back at him with perfect composure, as if emergency combat drops were a standard part of feline existence. "Here goes nothing," Tomas muttered, and stepped into the void. The sensation of freefall was briefly overwhelming before his jump pack engaged, slowing his descent. He angled toward the outpost, trying to follow the Zentari's vapor trail, when his HUD flashed a proximity warning. Something was rising from the ground to meet him. "Incoming projectiles," Lieutenant Knatz's voice crackled through the comm. "They're tracking our—" Her voice cut off as Tomas's world filled with flying objects, not bullets or energy blasts, but what looked like organic drones, winged creatures with crystalline growths attached to their bodies. One slammed into his left side, sending him spinning. His jump pack sputtered, compensating, but another hit followed, and then another. Through the chaos, he glimpsed his teammates similarly besieged, though they were faring better with their superior reflexes and armor. A particularly large drone rammed directly into his chest plate, knocking the wind from his lungs. His jump pack wailed in protest, controls no longer responding. The ground rushed up to meet him, a patchwork of purple stone and crystalline structures. "Mayday! Mayday!" Tomas gasped into his comm. "Pack compromised, uncontrolled descent." The only response was static, interspersed with fragments of combat chatter. "Jamming our... converging on my position," indicated fall back to point. The last thing Tomas registered before impact was a curious sensation from the carrier on his back, not the terrified reaction of a frightened animal, but something that felt almost like anticipation. Then darkness. Consciousness returned reluctantly, offering pain as a welcome back gift. Tomas groaned and tried to assess the damage. His HUD was dead, but his armor had absorbed most of the impact. According to his manual diagnostic, he had a fractured rib, minor internal bruising, and a dislocated shoulder. Painful but survivable. The armor's medical system had already administered painkillers and stabilizers. More pressing was his location. He'd landed in what appeared to be an abandoned section of the alien city, surrounded by crystal structures that hummed with faint energy. His comm produced nothing but static, either damaged or being jammed. "Artemis," he whispered, suddenly remembering his companion. A soft sound drew his attention. The carrier's auto-commission had activated during the crash, and his cat was now perched on a nearby crystal formation, tail swishing slowly as she surveyed their surroundings. "At least you're okay," Tomas muttered, pulling himself to his feet with a wince. "Now we just need to find the others, make it to the outpost, and somehow not die on this rock. Simple." Artemis jumped down and padded over, rubbing against his leg once before moving toward an opening between structures. She stopped, looked back at him, and meowed. "What? You want me to follow you?" "This isn't exactly Lassie," Tomas said, but he found himself moving in her direction anyway. At least it was a plan, which was more than he currently had. The crystal city was eerily quiet as they moved through it. The structures seemed to grow from the ground rather than being constructed, creating organic-looking spires and arches that defied conventional architecture. Occasionally, one would pulse with light, sending patterns dancing across adjacent surfaces. After about 20 minutes of careful navigation, Tomas heard sounds of combat in the distance, energy weapons and the distinctive roar of draconian battle cries. "That's our team," he whispered, checking his sidearm. His rifle had been damaged in the fall, but the plasma pistol still functioned. "We need to be careful." He turned to find Artemis already moving toward the sounds, her steps purposeful and silent. With a muttered curse, Tomas followed, trying to match her stealth while compensating for his injured ribs. They emerged onto a scene of chaos. A group of the indigenous aliens, tall, multi-limbed beings with crystalline exoskeletons, had surrounded 3 members of the UGDF team. Drax, a Mivarian named Trill, and one of the Zentari whose name Tomas couldn't recall. They were backed against a wall, shields depleted, returning fire but clearly overwhelmed. Tomas assessed the situation with growing dread. He couldn't possibly turn the tide, not in his condition, not with just a sidearm. The smart play would be to observe, gather intelligence, and try to find the commander or other reinforcements. That's when Artemis did something completely unexpected. The cat crouched low, muscles tensing beneath her sleek black fur. Her eyes, fixed on the aliens, seemed to glow with an intensity Tomas had never seen before. And then she moved. It wasn't a normal cat's movement, not the playful pounce or casual stalk he was familiar with. This was something primal, something so perfectly lethal that it seemed to bend the space between predator and prey. Before Tomas could react, Artemis was among the aliens, a black blur moving with impossible speed. One of the crystalline beings staggered backward, blue fluid spurting from a wound that hadn't existed a second earlier. Another fell, its limbs twitching. A third spun in confusion, firing wildly at a target it couldn't track. Drax and the others seized the opportunity, pressing their attack with renewed vigor. Tomas shook off his shock and joined the fray, his plasma pistol finding vulnerable joints in the aliens' crystalline armor. The skirmish ended quickly. The remaining aliens retreated, carrying their wounded, clearly reassessing the threat level of their opponents. In the sudden quiet, Drax turned to Tomas, his reptilian features unreadable. "You live!" "Surprising. Thanks for the warm welcome," Tomas replied, holstering his weapon. "Any word from the commander or the others?" The Maverian, Trill, shook her head. "Communications are still jammed. We were separated during the drop. The plan remains to reach the research outpost." "Which is where?" Drax pointed toward a ridge perhaps 2 kilometers distant. "There, across open terrain, with hostiles in between." "Perfect," Tomas muttered. His ribs throbbed despite the medication and fatigue was setting in. The adrenaline come-down would hit soon, and then he'd really be struggling. Something soft brushed against his ankle. Artemis had returned, looking for all the world like an ordinary house cat again, if you ignored the blue alien fluid that stained her muzzle and paws. Drax's eyes narrowed as he watched the cat begin to meticulously clean herself. "Your pet fight?" "Apparently," Tomas said, as surprised as anyone. He'd seen Artemis hunt moths in his apartment back on Earth, but this was something else entirely. "What exactly is this creature?" Trill asked, her gill slits fluttering with what Tomas recognized as scientific curiosity. "Just a cat," he replied with a shrug that sent pain shooting through his injured shoulder. "A common Earth predator, domesticated thousands of years ago." The Zentari spoke up, her skin pulsing with complex patterns. That was not the behavior of a domesticated animal. That was efficient, almost professional. Artemis, having finished her grooming, yawned widely and stretched, extending her claws briefly before retracting them. Then she stood, tail high, and began walking in the direction of the outpost. "I guess we're moving," Tomas said, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. As they set off, keeping low and using the crystal structures for cover, Tomas found himself re-evaluating everything he thought he knew about his feline companion. Cats were predators, yes, but what he'd just witnessed went beyond natural hunting ability. And judging by the way his alien teammates now maintained a respectful distance from Artemis, even Drax with all his draconian arrogance, he wasn't the only one whose perspective had shifted. A sound from ahead snapped Tomas back to the present. Movement among the crystals. A lot of movement. Their path to the outpost was about to get significantly more complicated. "Contact front," Drax growled, raising his weapon. "Many hostiles." Artemis stopped, her ears swiveling forward, her body tensing once more. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. from common house cat to something ancient and deadly. As the first wave of crystalline aliens emerged from cover, Tomas felt a strange calm settle over him. He was still the weakest human in the unit, still the least qualified soldier in the UGDF, still hopelessly outmatched by the evolutionary advantages of his teammates. But for the first time since leaving Earth, he wasn't the most underestimated creature in the fight. The crystalline aliens swarmed forward like a tide of living glass, their translucent limbs catching the alien sunlight. Tomas counted at least 30 impossible odds, even with Drax's strength and the Zenturi's speed. Tactical retreat, Tomas suggested, backing up. Coward, Drax rumbled, though he too was moving backward. Then Artemis moved. The small black cat exploded into action, becoming a shadow that danced between the aliens. Where she passed, blue fluid erupted from precision strikes. She wasn't attacking randomly. She was systematically targeting join points, sensory organs, and what appeared to be neural clusters. "Maverian's guilds," whispered Trill. "What manner of evolution produced this?" The aliens faltered, confused by an attacker too small and fast to track. Their crystalline bodies, evolved to withstand frontal assaults and energy weapons, offered no defense against a predator that slipped between their guard like liquid darkness. "The outpost, now!" Tomas shouted, seizing the opportunity. Their small group bolted for the ridge, while Artemis continued her devastating distraction. They were halfway to the objective when the ground beneath them trembled. Something massive was emerging. A queen or leader, nearly 3 times the size of the regular aliens. Its crystalline body pulsed with internal light, and it carried what looked like an energy cannon grafted to its torso. "Down!" Trill screamed as the cannon discharged. The blast vaporized the ground where they'd stood moments before. The queen reoriented, targeting them again, when a black blur latched onto its face. Artemis clung to the massive alien, her claws finding purchase in seemingly impenetrable crystal. The queen thrashed, firing wildly, as the cat methodically targeted what appeared to be sensory nodes. "We have to help," Tomas said, raising his pistol. "Your pet fights our battle," Drax observed, his voice holding new respect. "She's not fighting for us," Tomas realized suddenly. "She's fighting with us. There's a difference." They opened fire together, their weapons finding the weak points Artemis had already damaged. The queen staggered under the combined assault, its internal light flickering. With a final, precise strike, Artemis severed something vital in the queen's neck area. The massive alien collapsed, its crystalline body shattering on impact. The remaining aliens retreated, a chattering sound, perhaps communication, perhaps fear, echoing behind them. Artemis returned to Tomas, limping slightly but otherwise unharmed. She sat calmly before him and began to groom, as if decimating an alien force was simply another item on her daily checklist. "Your Earth creature," Drax said slowly. "It is a warrior." "Our cats are," Tomas replied, kneeling despite his pain to check Artemis for injuries. "We humans just forgot that because they let us feed them." As they crested the ridge, the research outpost finally came into view. Commander Vex Thorian and the other survivors had already secured the perimeter and were evacuating the science team. "You survived," the commander stated, compound eyes focusing on Tomas' battered form. "With the Draconians' help, I assume." "Surely?" Drax grumbled, his voice carrying unusual deference. "It was the humans' combat specialist that ensured our survival." The commander's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Combat specialist?" All eyes turned to Artemis, who had settled comfortably at Tomas's feet, eyes half closed, the picture of feline contentment. "That?" The commander's translator rendered his tone as pure disbelief. "That tiny fur creature." "Commander," Trill interjected, her scientific training evident, We witnessed this cat neutralize 17 hostiles, including their queen. Its combat efficiency exceeds our tactical projections by 340%. Perhaps, Tomas said, unable to keep a smile from his face, humans aren't the weakest species from Earth after all. We're just the ones willing to talk first. 2 weeks after the Proxima B extraction, the mood in the UGDF training facility had shifted like gravitational plates during a quantum realignment. Tomas walked through the corridors, no longer dodging sideways glances or whispered mockery. Instead, he received nods of acknowledgement, even respect. More interesting were the reactions to Artemis. Soldiers who once sneered now maintained a careful distance. The cat padded alongside Tomas as always, seemingly oblivious to her newfound reputation as the most lethal Earth export since hot sauce. The xenobiologists have a theory, Lieutenant Keonath said, falling into step beside him. Her skin pulsed with scholarly patterns. About your companion. They've been studying her for days, Tomas replied. What's the verdict? Earth's evolutionary pressures are unique. Her translucent features rearranged into the Zentari equivalent of astonishment. Your planet produced apex predators with efficiency ratios that exceed military optimization protocols. Your cats didn't evolve to survive, they evolved to hunt. Commander Vex Thorin was waiting in the briefing room, mandibles working nervously. The official mission report lay before him, along with new directives from UGDF High Command. Specialist Reyes, he acknowledged, compound eyes focusing anywhere but on Artemis. High Command has reassessed Earth's contribution to the Alliance. Ooh? Tomas kept his face neutral, though satisfaction bubbled beneath. Your planet's evolutionary history has been underestimated. The commander's translator struggled to convey his reluctant admiration. We focused on your physical limitations rather than your ecological context. Any species that evolved alongside creatures like that, he gestured toward Artemis, who was cleaning her paw with regal indifference, and survived to develop spaceflight, possesses qualities we failed to recognize. The commander pushed forward a tablet displaying Tomas's new assignment. You're being transferred to Special Reconnaissance. Your tactical insight, combined with your specialist, has been deemed valuable for high-risk operations. Drax entered, his massive frame now carrying a curious accessory, scratch marks across his ceremonial armor. The integration officers request you control your combat specialist, he rumbled. She claimed my sleeping quarters as her territory. That's cats for you, Tomas shrugged. They go where they want. Later, in his newly upgraded quarters, another perk of his status reassessment, Tomas watched Artemis sprawled across his pillow, the very picture of domestic tranquility. You knew all along, didn't you? He mused, scratching under her chin. While they were all measuring muscle mass and exoskeletons, you were just waiting for the right moment to show them what 4 million years of evolutionary perfection looks like. Artemis blinked slowly at him, a gesture cat owners recognized as affection, though the xenobiologists had recently classified it as predatory resource acknowledgement. The truth was both simpler and more profound. Humans hadn't conquered Earth through physical dominance. They'd done it by forming alliances with the planet's most efficient hunters. First wolves, who became dogs, partners in survival, and then cats, who had struck a more complex bargain, protection and worship, in exchange for pest control and the occasional display of what true predatory perfection looked like. When the lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Tomas felt Artemis settle against his side, her purr resonating through his ribs like a gentle reminder. He might be the weakest human in the unit, but the apex predator slept at his feet, and sometimes that was all the evolutionary advantage you needed.